Do you want to know the secret to getting a Band 7 or higher on your next academic Task 1 writing? Well, stick around, I'll show you how. Helping people prepare for MAPS is one of my favorite things to do because I'm going to give you tips that are so basic and so simple that I promise that you'll get a half a band or band higher on your next academic IELTS test, because there's just some basic questions you need to do when you get MAPS. And the next time you get a MAP on an academic IELTS test, you're going to feel, yay, I got a MAP. This is very straightforward compared to the other types of questions. And a big thank you to my friends at IELTS Blog for providing this prompt. If you want to check out more about them, look below. There's more information about me as well. Well, let's get started. Okay, well here we are with our two maps, and let's get started with the questions that you should be asking yourself when you get these types of map. Well, what are you comparing? This is very important for every single academic Task 1. So let's look at that now. If you look at the top, you're looking at, the two maps in before and after proposed new changes to stop cars entering the old town. Now this is pretty important because a lot of maps on the IELTS test, they will talk about past changes. There are a few that talk about, future proposals. So that's something key that I'm going to talk about later. But yes, this is a map. It's not real yet. It's for the future. And that's important here. When are you comparing? Because these are proposed. They're not 100% for sure that they're going to change them, but you can use future tenses and kind of speculating language like they plan to, right? Or the city is planning to, or there's a plan to. Expressions like this will really help you when using your grammar to talk about this. Again, this is why I always tell people, be very careful about the time, because this greatly affects your grammar and the vocabulary that you use. Okay, and if you look down here, you've got maps here, maps of Barmouth before and then after. Okay, now if we move on, you've got what has been added. Now, I'm going to stop here and just say about all maps, there are three things. The first one is what's been added, and because often things have been added from a previous year to some change in the future. It could be it could be sometime in the past to another time in the past, but in this case, like I said, it's the future. So let's look at the what's been added at the bottom, right? There's a car park over there in the west. There's a bridge down here in the south. There's a supermarket that's been added. There's a car park over here as well in the east. And then there's two foot entrances, one on the west and one on the east. Okay? And please notice that I'm using direction. It's very important that you do that, and I'll mention that more later. Next, what has been removed? Okay? Now, other maps, it's very popular that, in this case, a lot of things have been added. But there are times when a lot of things have been removed. For example, for like environmental reasons, maybe the city wants to, let more wildlife or a river. So don't just think that, every map is just adding. Sometimes more things have been removed. But for this map, if you look at the top, okay, the road entrance has been removed, okay, just that one thing. And then for what has changed, again, this is probably the most popular for most maps. There'll be like one thing, a car park has changed to a library, something like that for a school. So again, this one doesn't have many changes, but be aware that that's what you're focusing on. And here you can see that the road has been changed to, on foot walking, for walking there. So those three questions, added, removed, and changed, those are absolutely critical for when you're planning if you get a map. And if you just think about those three things, you will be absolutely fine, and just make sure you talk about everything. And how to show location. This is the biggest tip I can give people. So many times people just talk about the changes. They don't talk about where the changes happen. Remember, we're dealing with a map here. So you can look at north, east, south, and west, or you can use landmarks. In this case, you've got the River Tweed in the east, and you've got the main road. So use direction, use landmarks. This is absolutely critical to get a higher score for your academic task 1. Now, as always, I mentioned you have to reword the prompt. Well, you don't have to, but you have to if you want to get a higher score for those words. If you don't reword the prompt, you are not minused points. It just doesn't count for your final score. So why don't you take a minute and pause the video and try to reword the prompt now. Okay, here's my example. The maps given portray the town of Barmouth before and after potential changes designed to make the old town pedestrian only. So you can see in my pink parts, I've changed those words, okay? It actually feels like I've changed everything, but some of the words I've taken from the prompt. And, you know, I try to change it each time in each video in a bit of a different way. There are many ways to change them. Go back and look at the other videos to see how I've reworded other prompts. But there's not just one way to do it. So why don't you put your rewordings in the comments section below? I'd love to read them. Now we move on to the most important part. Well, tips for a good overview. Okay, don't use figures or details. Okay, in this case it's details, right, about east and west. There's no figures here, but there are a lot of details, but you don't have to mention them. Organize the main trends. Okay, in this case, if we go back to the previous questions, the main trends here are a little bit different. Again, we're talking about things that are added, things that are removed, and things that have changed. Keep it short. The map one is much shorter than the others, and you'll see below. But first, why don't you try to write your own overview for this one? I'd love to see it in the comment section below. Please do that now. Pause the video before I show you mine. Okay, here's mine, and this is much shorter. I feel like the map overview is one of the easiest. So first I address the future. If everything goes as planned, and then the city will make additions, changes, and removals in order to prevent vehicles entering the old town. Now you can take this overview and use it for almost every single map IELTS can give you, because that's what's happening in every map. Maybe the reason is different. As I mentioned earlier, maybe a city is removing some sort of buildings or roads to make it, to add like more green spaces. So if it were that, you could say, to make more green spaces in the city, things have been added, removed, and changed. It's the exact same. So that's why I'm so happy to give you this one, is because there's a lot of ways to write overviews for bar charts or line graphs, but for a map, this kind of standard procedure will help you so much. And that's why I feel like you'll be excited if you get a map on your next IELTS test. Next, we just let that overview do the work for you. And it's quite basic. Look, first, we just talk about additions. That's it. So here's my example. And again, you can write your examples in the comment section. Again, I love to read them. I'm not going to write everything. The first one I always write is a bit longer, but to begin with additions, we can see the plans for 2 car parks. One will be located on the west side after crossing the bridge, and the other in the east, just off the main road. In addition, pedestrian-only entrances are proposed, and this is where you can keep writing and talk about where they are proposed. Okay, use your vocabulary to talk about direction, and that's it. And make sure you talk about everything. That's so important. So the paragraph 2 will be a bit longer than paragraph 3, because in this map's case, there are a lot more additions rather than changes and removals. So you got to be aware of that. And like I said, put your example in the comments. Next, well, let's put changes and removals together. Now, if there were, the reason I put them together is because there's only one of each. This is my organization strategy. You could have, in most maps, you could have 3 paragraphs, one for additions, one for changes, and one for removals. But in this case, I've decided to put them together. Otherwise, the paragraph will be quite short. So, despite all the additions, there was a major change and removal, because one, right, there was, that will also occur first. And like I always say, put your example in the comment section. I would love to read them. Now, as always, there are some very important reminders that you can't forget if you want to get a high score. The first is use a range of future grammatical forms. I'm going to talk about the grammar first here because, like I said, these are proposed. And, you know, a lot of people memorize templates based on past, and then they get a map that might be about the future. There might even be 3 maps, where one is like what's happened in the past, there's a present map, and there's a future map. You have to be really aware of the time when you're picking your grammar, because grammar, one, it talks about time, and for academic task 1, that's the most important use for grammar here. So you got to be well aware of that. There's less need to use comparing words, right? People will love to just, you know, talk about, you know, everything that's changed like it's a bar chart. Well, this one, like for additions, right? You don't have to say, you know, for this particular map, you don't have to say that there was no car park in the first map on the west. You can just say a car park was added. Now, of course, if something changed, yes, you would use more comparing language, but not always. When there's additions and there's nothing there before, you're not really comparing anything. Next, use a range of synonyms accurately, okay? So, you know, you could, instead of just saying, following the language in the prompt all the time, okay? On foot walking, you know, you could say pedestrian only. If you know other expressions, you know, for like path or walkway, for this type of question, this will really help you a lot. Don't forget locations. I mentioned this earlier. So many times I've read academic task 1 essays and people just talk about the changes. Location is absolutely key, and you'll be surprised how low your score will be, and you won't know why, right? You won't know why your score is so low. It's probably you forgot something simple like location, like in the east. But again, if you just say east, west, north all the time, it's less clear. But if you mention near the main road or near the River Tweed, that will help you a lot. And don't get off topic, okay? And mention everything. Mention everything means, well, get off topic. You again, don't guess why. You know, don't say, you know, for pollution reasons. Basically, you just follow the prompt. They want, you know, no cars in there. Now, mention everything means don't miss any points, okay? Every point for this is valid. It's not like the line graphs where there's certain years that are more important. No, no, no. Every single point that has changed in the map is equal. Everything has to be mentioned. That's really, really important. So make a note of that. You must talk about everything. Same like with the foot-only entrance, you have to talk about the one in the east and the one in the west. So be very aware of that. And as always, you don't need a conclusion. If you have a good overview and you talk about everything in your body paragraphs, move on. I mentioned this in all of my videos. You absolutely don't need a conclusion. Save your time for the much more important task 2. And as always, I try to remind you, you don't want me to write the full essay. The reason is a lot of people memorize these things and then they try to put, you know, the template they've memorized, and you can't memorize perfectly, onto a different style map. This won't work. Remember, it could be a different time. It could be more, you know, it could be more changes rather than removals. So again, no two maps are exactly the same. I did mention that the overview is very simple. So if you want to memorize that kind of style, that would be beneficial, but you have to use your own vocabulary and your own grammar, and memorizing often doesn't work. Please check out the playlist for speaking part 2 and 3. And there I use real questions, I give you real advice, and I do mock tests. It's really helpful. And if you want to see all my videos, check out the links below. And I wish you the best of luck on your next IELTS test.